Welcome to Parent Coaches Unleashed with Carrie and Jessica, where no topics are taboo or off limits. Join us as we let loose and discuss the real, raw feelings about parenting.
In each episode, we will bring you heartfelt discussions, real-life stories, and special guests that will both entertain you and encourage community so no one feels alone in their parenting journey.
Thanks so much for listening. Now let's start the show.
Hi, everybody. So today I have a really interesting story for you. Carrie and I have a guest, Dr. Layne Martin. Hi, Layne.
Hello.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
So Layne and I met at a dinner party at a friend's house, and we just had regular small talk. Oh, so what do you do? What do you do? And Layne had a really interesting story where he started out as a dentist and got into orthodontist and eventually became involved with helping people with sleep disorders and disturbances. But what was interesting to me was the child part of it. Because when you think of a sleep disorder or disturbance, in my mind, and probably an antiquated way of thinking, but I thought of an older, obese person who was having sleeping issues. And clearly that is not the case. And Dr. Layne Martin is here to talk to us about the implications that interrupted sleep could have for our children. We really feel that this could be so informative to so many parents as they observe their children and their behaviors. So welcome, Layne. Let's start. How did your journey through dentistry bring you here?
Yeah, I have had a very convoluted career and story. So I actually received a scholarship from the U.S. Navy for dental school. I joined the Navy to do oral surgery and ended up getting out of the Navy, did not do surgery, joined a big cosmetic practice in Manhattan, New York. It was great. I was seeing a lot of celebrities. I was working with some amazing specialists. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole where I was doing dentistry at a very high level. And I ended up teaching, and I would meet with these dentists that did very complex dentistry. And we would meet once a month. And one of the dentists in the group, a gentleman named Victor Avis, every time we would present like a very complex case, he'd be like, the patient has an airway problem. And I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? I just want to do my veneers and crowns and kind of live this lifestyle. And after about the 50th time, I was like, all right, Victor, explain to me this airway thing. And once he started explaining it to me, I realized that the things that we see every day as a dentist or even a pediatric dentist, a lot of times are the signs of an airway problem. Things from people that clench and grind their teeth to people that have narrow jaws or recessed jaws. So what happened was I started doing these airway residencies and I was starting to recognize these things in patients, but I didn't know how to fix it.
Okay.
So fast forward, it's about 2018, 2019, I start researching how to fix airway problems. And I realized that orthodontics is a way to mitigate a lot of these signs and symptoms. So at the age of 42, I sold my dental practice and I went to do an orthodontic and craniofacial orthopedic residency. And everyone is like, what are you talking about? You're going back to school. I mean, my mentors are like, you're crazy. But it was really an aha moment for me because I felt like you don't know what you don't know. So I would never sit on a podcast or I would never go in a lecture and beat up other practitioners. It's just we're not taught that. And until someone pointed it out to me, I never even recognized it. So I went in to do orthodontics. And while I was at my orthodontic residency, I had a patient of mine that passed away from sleep apnea. And the problem was that when I treated him, I knew he had a problem. And I went and I told him to go get a sleep test and he never went. And now he's gone. And I think what was in reality is, if it happened in my office, it's happening in every dental office in the country, especially at adults. And you brought up a great point, Jessica. You know, we thought of it, at least when I thought about sleep apnea, I would always think of it as this Pickwickian fat person. But I mean, I snore. I see tons of fit men and women that snore. And to your point about the children, that's a huge problem. And while I was in my orthodontic residency and fellowship, I was really starting to recognize these things in children because I would see these kids that are coming in from having a cognitive issue to a behavior issue, and all these kids are on stimulants. And that's really a problem in our country is we treat symptoms.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't treat the problem. I mean, I treated symptoms my entire restorative dental career. Someone would break a tooth and I do a crown on them. And what was happening was I was making a lot of these patients worse. And in terms of children, it's, I always say kids should be calm, quiet, and dry. So calm, no hyperactivity.
Okay.
Dry, no bedwetting or drool. And quiet, no kind of grinding your teeth or snoring. So what was happening is, especially when I was in my fellowship and residency, I would start looking at these children a lot differently. And even something as simple as, if you see a 12-year-old and they look like they're 6, they could potentially have an airway problem. They're not producing growth hormone. And that's
How is that an airway? How is that an airway problem?
Because what happens is when you get into a certain part of your sleep cycle, in kids, we produce growth hormone. In adults, it's more reparative sleep. So kids, if they're not getting into that cycle of sleep, they're not going to produce growth hormone the same way as a child that's sleeping better or that's sleeping throughout the night that's not having an airway problem. So what happens, I always talk about orthodontics as really being more about brain development than teeth. Your brain is almost fully developed by the age of 5. So a lot of times what we were doing is we were looking at early intervention orthodontics, addressing a lot of these things in these kids that were having the ADD, ADHD, symptoms like that. And then in terms of the growth hormone, like this was me. I was this kid. I was 5'2" up until 12th grade of high school. You met me. I'm 5'11" now. So I had a big growth spurt, but I was a sick kid that became a sick adult. And a lot of it stems from lack of breastfeeding. So breastfeeding is obviously there's a benefit of the nutritional value, but really the benefit of breastfeeding is help forming your craniofacial complex, your face from the sucking. The other thing is hard foods. I grew up on Gerber baby food and my mom is a nurse, so I wasn't breastfed. And I never developed properly. And that's kind of the things that we're looking at is like, if your child has these things, and the other thing is a lot of kids do grind their teeth, and will they grow out of it? Potentially. But I always say no child should snore or grind their teeth. And the grinding the teeth is, sometimes it is the way your teeth come into your mouth and the way they develop. But a lot of times it's grinding is a tonsil and adenoid issue. It's an airway problem. So the simplest way that I explain it to patients is if I ask Carrie and you why someone grinds their teeth, what's the answer that most people give me, you think?
Stress.
It's stress from suffocating. Because my response is, did the 3 or 4-year-old have a tough day at the office?
Right.
No. They're having what I call as an airway problem. The best analogy is if you're speeding on the highway and you go past the cop and you look in your rearview mirror and you see the cop pulling out, what happens to your body when you see the police officer? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, and you clench down. You go into fight or flight. So think about how crappy that feels for 20 seconds. Now, on the adult side, that could happen 200 times a night. Those are people that are in fight or flight all the time. And a lot of it is probably contributory towards things like bedwetting.
So is there a correlation?
Oh, sorry.
Is there a correlation between maybe children who were bedwetting to future issues with their airway? And yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, my business partner is a world famous TMJ specialist. When him and I get up and lecture, he talks about bedwetting all the time. He was bedwetting till he was 9 years old. It's something that I see here in New York. A lot of parents on the Upper East Side couldn't send their kids to sleepaway camp because their kids are bedwetting or sending them to sleepovers. It's a very debilitating problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's something as simple as having the kids have a palatal expander, having their lower jaw come forward, because those are things that are contributory towards having an airway problem. So I always look at palatal expansion from an orthodontic standpoint. The roof of your mouth is the floor of your nose. So when we talk about these airway things, the first thing I look at is nasal patency, being able to breathe through your nose properly. The second thing is soft tissue. So that's the tonsils and adenoids. Those are the kids that are sometimes tongue-tied and have speech issues. The last piece is what we do anatomically of getting the jaws to have more room or getting the lower jaw forward.
This is really feels like an aha because I was a bedwetter. And I am a teeth grinder. So, I don't know if I was grinding while I was a child, but based on what you're saying, it's more than likely that I was grinding.
Yeah. And that's I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's the
No,
one
that's okay.
thing that I screwed up royally as a dentist. Every patient would come in, they would grind their teeth. So what would I do? I'd build their teeth up. I'd give them a night guard and be like, here, this is your insurance policy that what I do for you isn't going to break. But what I was missing was the rationale and the reason why they were grinding their teeth.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we do.
Is there education now? Is there education with pediatricians and parents? Is this information? Obviously, that's why we have you on today, to try to reach parents. But how would parents know this information, and how would they be guided towards you to see that there's something going on than what they're thinking, right? They probably go to their pediatrician. Why is my child still wetting the bed?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something that the parents need to be proactive. You need to walk into the pediatric dentist. You need to walk into the pediatrician and say, my son or daughter is grinding their teeth and they're snoring and they're wetting their bed. And if it's not getting addressed, then you need to find a different practitioner that's going to address it. Because, and that's the other thing too, I know a lot of great orthodontists and pediatric dentists now that are doing early intervention orthodontics that really help out a lot of these kids. So when I see a kid with an airway problem, my first referral is the pediatric EN, because I want to rule out the soft tissue, the tonsils and adenoids. The second thing is I work a lot with what's called a myofunctional therapist, which is really like a speech pathologist for your tongue. And a lot of oral myologists or speech pathologists do myofunctional therapy. We have someone great in Florida that I use. So there's a lot of great people that are starting to become aware of these things. It's a huge hot topic in dentistry now as well.
So you mentioned teeth grinding and snoring. Are there any other red flags that parents should be looking for that could point to a sleep disturbance or an airway issue?
So I would say things like delayed speech, delayed growth, cognitive issues, behavior issues. There's a great video that one of the academies made. It's called Finding Connor Deegan. It's a mom whose son was, at the time, it's not a diagnosis. It was a diagnosis, oppositional defiant disorder, and also an ADD. And the kid was getting shuffled around from one doctor to another. And the mom was like really beside herself because she's like, my son is having all these problems. He's really a gifted kid, but just can't focus. And a pediatric dentist in Chicago was the one that really recognized that the kid had an airway problem. He ended up getting his tonsils and adenoids out. He got a palatal expander, and the kid was a different kid. I mean,
That's
every time
incredible.
I watch it, I cry because I'm like, that was my story and the impact that you could have. And a lot of these kids are slipping through the cracks. Now, especially when I was a resident and I saw a kid that I thought had a problem, I would always ask the parent. Now, sometimes parents are in denial or they just don't know. So what I would say is, do me a favor. Just film your son or daughter sleeping. And when you witness a kid gasping or snoring, that is an eye-opening experience to a parent. And that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. No child should snore.
And I have to imagine so many parents, that's such a hard thing to diagnose, just because after their infancy, how many people are actually sitting there watching their child sleep?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's something, as, especially in orthodontics now, I look at faces where I only looked at teeth. So there's certain angles that I look at that I'm already thinking like, all right, that person might have an airway problem. And it's kind of this angle under your chin. Now, the issue is for kids, our lower jaw grows after our upper jaw. So a lot of the problems are really related to tongue and tongue position. So that's why things like tongue tie, and that's something I also ask parents. Did the child have a hard time latching on if they attempted to breastfeed?
All right. So when someone finds you or another provider, can you walk us through what you do to help them once we know, that this is the issue?
Yeah. Like I said, the first thing especially on a child, is I refer to a pediatric ENT because I really want to rule out the tonsils and adenoids. The second
Right.
thing is I focus on nasal breathing. So there's things that they could do, like a neti stick, which is like almost looks like a Vicks vapor inhaler.
Mm-hmm.
So it's saline sometimes to just lubricate. And then also we use intake nasal dilators. They look like breathe right strips.
Okay.
And on certain kids, you could use it too. So it starts with nasal breathing and then it goes into the soft tissue. And then a lot of times I refer right to a pediatric dentist or an orthodontist to try to get early intervention. Orthodontics helps out a lot of these kids. Now, it's not going to help out everyone because a lot of kids that do get tonsils and adenoids out still do have an airway problem based on anatomy, based on if their lower jaw is too far back.
So then what? What are their options?
That's
then?
when I would recommend taking the child to the orthodontist.
Okay.
And then
Now,
the other thing is, for adults, it's a little different. So my partner and I developed a mouthpiece that just got FDA cleared. So people that either use a CPAP or are not compliant on it could wear a mouthpiece, or you can do it in combination. The problem is sometimes those people fail if they sleep on their back. So the other product we developed was a pillow. So I actually have a kid's version of a pillow that we're testing probably within the next month or two because it's the same thing. Everyone should sleep on their side. People shouldn't sleep on their back.
Okay. Because of airway.
If you sleep on your back, gravity takes over, your tongue falls back. And a lot of times your jaw falls back as well.
So I'm just curious, with your mouthpiece in adults, have you had reports of adults using your mouthpiece and them sleeping better and maybe resolve issues that have been going on for years with them?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the mouthpiece, we get incredible feedback. The pillow was really more of a necessity because what I would do is I would look at a lot of the patients that were using our mouthpiece and we had a really good success rate. What I really wanted to see were the people that weren't successful. And why were they not successful? And a lot of those patients weren't successful when they were lying on their back. So when I look at a sleep test, it's amazing information and I could see where they're having the most event. And a lot of times it was when they were on their back. So one of my best friends is an ear, nose, and throat doctor. We were treating a friend. He told them to put a tennis ball on their t-shirt. But I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because if they roll on a tennis ball or use one of these things from Amazon, it'll potentially wake them up. So he's, what would you do? I said, I don't know. I'd probably design a pillow. People are already sleeping on a pillow. And we kind of designed a pillow. I ended up making the first version of the pillow. And now we have a pillow company. And the fact is, the pillow is great. And the reason I love the pillow and I'm passionate about it is everyone's already sleeping on a pillow. Everyone doesn't have the luxury to go to the doctor and the dentist. So right now I'm doing clinical trials on the pillow to see if I could take adults and kids that have airway and sleep issues and see if I could even reduce some of those just with a pillow. And we're getting some pretty amazing results. I didn't think our pillow would work that well. And it's pretty incredible. I was on the phone today with a gentleman that just had a hip replacement. He has our pillow. He brought it to the hospital with him. And he's like, Layne, I went from getting up to pee 2 to 3 times a night to sleeping throughout the whole night. And I'm like, that's amazing. Just from our pillow.
What does the pillow look like? How does it work?
So I'll give you guys the website. It's called Open Air Pillow. It literally looks like a better version of a pregnancy pillow. It's shaped like an L. We have a patent on it. It's like creating a fulcrum. So when the head part goes down, the back part pops up. And it's a material that is very responsive and it's very comfortable.
I'm signing my husband up for the pillow and the trial if he wants to, because he fits right into the demo. But he was a child with the chin grew, recessed over the nose. As an adult, he had major jaw surgery, then orthodontics again. And so I think we're going to be a customer.
Yeah. I can't sleep without the pillow. Like I've hacked my sleep because a couple of years ago I was snoring. I was tired. I would need coffee by 4 or 5 o'clock. And I definitely was starting to get a little bit of the brain fog. So I have our mouthpiece and our pillow. So I've kind of hacked my own sleep.
You're going to need to make a travel pillow though, because or we're all going to have to stay home.
I agree I'm
Once
working
we,
on it. And, you know,
okay.
so it's interesting. My co-CEO in the pillow is an Air Force veteran. I'm a Navy veteran. We're going to be donating pillows to active duty and veterans. It's part of our brand, which is why, as much as I love our mouthpiece and I love kind of teaching, the pillow is really amazing, because I even think our kids' version of the pillow is going to be bigger than our adult version of the pillow, because that's a big thing, right? When so many kids don't sleep properly. When you don't sleep properly, that's when the kids are getting a lot of the hyperactivity, a lot of the cognitive issues,
Yeah.
and
Well,
they're
I
just
mean,
not getting oxygen to a certain part of their brain.
sleep habits start, or healthy sleep habits should start at a very young age.
Yeah.
And so if
Layne, have you had any
Oh, sorry.
personal success stories like Connor Deegan? Have you seen an improvement?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you hear it every day. I mean, that's what kind of lights me up, is that when you hear a story like this guy that's sleeping on the pillow amazing, or a kid that we've treated, or someone we did palatal expansion on, that's just a different kid. Like that to me is a success story. I
Of
mean,
course.
listen, everyone wants to make a living, but I'm really fortunate now that I love waking up every day doing what I'm doing. And because I mean, I just got pressed a couple of months ago. I ran into a mentor of mine, and he's like, I can't believe you're not in private practice every day, and you were so good. And, you know, personality wise, I feel like your patients really loved you. And I walked away from it thinking like, man, maybe I should go back into private practice. But instead of touching 1,000 people, the opportunity to touch 200 million people, that's what lights me up every day. And,
Right.
you know, I did training because I realized that I had to start getting on podcasts and getting in front of large groups of people. And I did some CEO public speaking training. And we did it with a guy that played in the NFL. And he said three very profound things that I kind of live by now. He said, the first thing is, I want you to go in the opposite direction of everyone else, which my business partner is a gentleman named Michael Gelb. He's a world famous TMJ specialist. Like I said, he's probably one of the biggest disruptors in dentistry, and rightfully so. Him and his father were pioneers in sleep and this. Second, he's like, I want you to be able to walk into Starbucks and have people not be able to look away. And, you know, I think I'm working on that. But the other thing is, he's like, stop apologizing for being the best. And that took me a little while to understand. And I felt like I've been apologizing my whole life for being good at something. And now to be able to get in front of people and share the message and help, you know, your listeners help their kids, like that to me is what lights me up. And, you know, I've gotten some pushback from people, and I got up and lectured, and I even about our mouthpiece, because I'm boarded in sleep with this dental organization. And I said, I'm like, every dentist should be able to make a sleep appliance. You know, every dentist makes night guards. That's our sleep appliance. It's just a better night guard, because that's what people understand. And that's what a lot of dentists understand. But if you're making a night guard for a patient, you're basically saying that patient's grinding and clenching. And when someone's grinding and clenching, they're probably going into fight or flight. And that's kind of the message to, even if you have listeners that are dentists or they know a dentist, that's the message that we want to get out. Like the grinding, clenching, that's a compensation for a bigger problem.
or something.
So if you're a grinder, what should you be asking your dentist? Is there something specific that we should be asking our dentists about?
It should, and they basically should just look at it a little differently, because what I was saying before is the issue with grinding and clenching is that I didn't really understand it. I'm just telling dentists now, just look at it differently and treat it different. That's the message, because what would I do? I'd always make people an upper night guard.
Right, that's
and
what I had.
But the problem is, most of us have a deficient upper jaw. A lot of us have very narrow jaws. So if you put in an upper night guard in a child or an adult that has a narrow upper jaw, it's taking up tongue space. The only time your teeth should touch is when you swallow food, about 10 to 15 minutes a day. So we get pushed back a lot, because with our sleep appliances and other things we do orthodontically, people are like, oh, the person's bite's going to change. You're going to screw up their bite. And listen, I need people to obviously bite a certain way to be able to eat food. But at the end of the day, your teeth should only touch for 15 minutes a day. You have to breathe for 1,440 minutes a day. What's more important, staying alive and breathing, or how your teeth touch? I think they're both important, but What I'm saying is airway issues trumps anything else that I see in dentistry. The people still need dentistry. The kids still need orthodontics. You just have to look at those patients differently, including yourself, including myself, of people that grind their teeth.
Sure.
So parents that are listening, if they want to get more information, or if they're questioning, wow, I think something's going on with my child, what would you recommend they do next? And how should they reach out to you?
Absolutely.
Should they first? Okay.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
can share my email, which is lmartin, LMARTIN, at GPSFORDENTAL.com. So lmartin at GPSfordental.com.
Yep.
And if people are interested in looking at the pillow, it's just openairpillow.com.
Okay.
And we'll have our kids version out probably after the new year.
Okay.
And it even, it's something that we're going to probably test out on a lot of kids, and be able to get feedback from the parents is really helpful for that as well. Because really what we're trying to do, like I said, is really gamify sleep and make it more of how do you have these kids sleeping better? And part of our brand, even for the adult version of the pillow, and I was just with our co-CEO is a gentleman named JD. He's like, what's happening is you can go out and buy a $10,000 mattress, but no one's ever taught you how to sleep properly. I never knew how to sleep properly.
That's so true.
It's such a great point. And his whole argument is it's the pillow. It has nothing to do really
with the mattress.
Take our pillow and we could sleep on the ground on our pillow. That's how comfortable it is.
And does it matter what side you sleep on?
So that's a great question. I would say you should sleep on your left side if you have issues with high blood pressure, acid reflux, pregnancy. Right side more if you have cardiovascular issues, heart problems.
Okay.
And if you have none of those things, it doesn't make a difference which side?
You're gonna end up tossing and turning in the middle of the night. So if you go to our website, what I do with our pillow is I have it behind me and it almost like hugs me. And in the middle of the night, I roll over and I actually hug it. And that's kind of what I do for that.
I think it's also a great message to send to our parents to watch your child sleep, just even for a snippet. Is there a certain time of night they would see this happen, or?
That's also a great question. I would say the latter part of the night is sometimes a little bit better to observe when they're kind of into the REM stage of sleep, the dream stage of sleep. Because what happens in REM is that our sleep cycles are around 90 minutes. So what happens in REM is that your body's almost completely paralyzed except for your diaphragm, or else you'd act out your dreams. So when I look at a sleep test, the numbers are significantly higher when someone's in the REM stage of sleep versus the non-REM stages of sleep. So that's kind of where I want to see a lot of what's happening there.
If you have an airway obstruction or disturbance, can you get into a REM cycle sleep? Does it prevent you from getting into a deep sleep?
It absolutely can prevent you from getting into a deep part of sleep, which is why a lot of people. So the questions I always ask, now I see a lot of adults now on the sleep side. The questions I always ask, are you aware that you snore? I never ask someone if they snore. It's still considered accusatory, even though 70% of the U.S. population, I think, snore right now. 2, could you be more refreshed? Who's not going to answer that they could be more refreshed, right?
Right.
The other thing is I also ask about acid reflux, heartburn, and then also having to get up and go to the bathroom. And those are a little bit deeper on the medical side in terms of certain comorbidities, but that's really important information for me to get. Now, on the jaw side of treating a lot of patients with TMJ problems, and I learned that from my partner, it's a lot of ear issues. So things like tinnitus, ringing in the ears, muffled ear sounds. Sometimes a lot of kids are getting tubes in their ears. A lot of times that's from having their jaws being too pushed back. And that could be a whole other podcast of talking about ear issues and jaw pain.
Well, how you said at the beginning that you felt like you did a disservice to so many of your patients. I'm kind of feeling that way about my kids now. My daughter had ear issues. My son has reflux. I think we're all going to come pay you a visit. We're all taking a trip into the city.
Yeah. Well, this is why, one of my partners is in the room here with me that is helping us with the pillow. And it's like, how do you get this message across to the masses? Now, what you guys do is incredible, and I'm always willing to kind of jump on a podcast and share our message of how do you get kids treated? How do you get adults treated? The beauty of the pillow company is really going to the masses. So it's so funny because people always ask me, they're like, oh my God, are you going to be the next My Pillow guy? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be that guy. I mean, without some of the craziness, but
Right.
we, my partner and I really have a great story. We're coming at this from two different avenues. He's coming at it from the sleep and bedding side. I'm coming at it from the airway kind of health side. And we have a product that really helps children and adults sleep better, with also the part of us donating it to people like veterans, like active duty people that are having issues with PTSD, anxiety, depression. And that's a massive problem.
Yeah. Well, Layne, thank you so much for being with us today and for opening our eyes, our ears to these problems we didn't even know were out there.
So, yeah. And we will put links to reach Layne and to his pillow in our show notes, so everyone will have access to him and the information. So
yeah, and
thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you guys both so much for having me on, and please, share my email if anyone has any questions.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure a lot of the viewers and people listening are in, I'm assuming, Florida, so I really do know some great providers down there. One of our myofunctional therapists is down there, and she has a great network of people that she could refer to as well.
Well, Layne, like you, we hope that we are reaching the millions as well. So
not just
stuck to Florida.
Yeah. That's right.
All right.
Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Parent Coaches Unleashed with Carrie and Jessica. Together, we can raise the next generation of independent, capable, and compassionate young adults.
We encourage you to send us an email with questions and feedback to info@parentcoachesunleashed.com. Please remember, you are not alone on this parenting journey.